3D Taz in a Tornado Acrylic Nail Art Tutorial by Hotpinkzebrapolish.
Hi everybody, in today's video I have a very 3D Tasmanian devil nail art design, and so it's got the perfect little Taz from Looney Tunes with his arms out like this, like he's a crazy person, and then a little tornado that goes across the bottom of the nail. I hope you guys like it as much as I do. I call this one Taz all the time because there are certainly moments where she runs around like she has a tornado up her butt. Right. She has a funny little smirk. I hope you guys like it as much as I do, and don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future videos as well. Bye!
I'm going to begin with an overlay of a glittery yellow acrylic. So Taz has kind of, those neutral, not super feminine colors about him. So I want to keep the background sort of in line with that. And this glittery yellow stays in that sort of less feminine color scheme, while the glitter just makes it a little bit more fun for me. So that's why I chose that color for my background. And after you have that overlay applied for the color, I'm going to take and encase the nail with a layer of clear acrylic to make sure it is nice and strong. This yellow glitter that I have, I've had this in my collection for longer than you guys know, and I forget about it. It is such a pretty summery, even though it's really not summer right now at all, but very pretty color that I should remember to use a little more often. And it's definitely one, though, that you should encase, because the glitter, anytime you're using a glitter, you really should just make sure that you have a layer of clear over the top of it. Then I'm going to be filing the nail into shape with my e-file, starting out with a coarse bit to remove any bulk and just kind of smooth it all out and make sure that it's going to have a nice shape in the end, and then use a finer bit to refine the surface texture and remove any little scratches that first bit may have left behind. So now on a nail form backing, I'm going to be sculpting Taz's arms. So with brown acrylic, and I'm using kind of, again, to make this slightly more girly and glitzy, I'm using a shimmery brown acrylic for his arms. So I'm going to start and just kind of create a V shape. Then with the very tip of your brush, I'm going to start sort of just adjusting things here and there and pushing in and create the little hand shape on the end of the arm, which is almost kind of like just two little, almost claw-like looking shapes. So then after you have the first one done, go ahead and repeat for the second arm, just like so. And if you guys didn't want to make this the slightly girly way that I did with the glitter in the background, you certainly wouldn't have to, and you wouldn't have to make Taz this kind of metallic bronze color. But I think it just adds an interesting element to it. So after you have those first little claw shapes done, you're going to want to add a second or a third finger. So you have a thumb and two fingers. So yeah, a second finger or a third, whatever. You guys know what I'm saying, but just add the third little finger up above it on the one side to each of those arms, just like so. And then let those set up until they are completely firm and they are not going to be bending at all. And then once they've reached that stage, you can go ahead and glue them to the nail. So just take a little bit of nail glue and then hold those in place, just like so. If you have something convenient like an extra finger to balance them on as they're setting up, that is super helpful, so you can hold them both at the same time and aren't just sitting there waiting for half an eternity for that nail glue to set up. For me, nail glue is one of those tedious items that I dread using each and every time because it never seems to listen to what I'm telling it to do. But then with brown acrylic, the same one that you used with his arms, I'm going to start sculpting the top of his head. So on the top of his head, he has this little tuft of hair that's coming out the very top right between his ears. So that's where I started with, is that little tuft. And then add two little tufts on the side of it. So it's got one bigger one in the middle and then two little ones on the side, very similar to the hairstyle of my zebra, actually, now that I think about it. And then within those, you're also going to want to add the little brown ears. So on the two on the side, I just pressed my brush in a little bit to create an indent for the ears, and that actually didn't have to do anything else for it. That did a good enough job on creating the ears. And then add a little bit of a peachy color inside those indents you created with your brush. Add a bit more brown down below for where around his eyes will be. Use the tip of your brush to press in the eye areas. Do not make his eyes symmetrical. If you're looking at him, his left eye is always a little bit taller and a little bit more crazy, and the asymmetrical eyes give him more of a Taz look, I suppose. And then I'm going to take a beige color and I'm going to be sculpting kind of like down the sides of his face, around his lower jaw, and all the way around his mouth and his cheeks up above. So that's the side of his mouth there, and then the very lower part where I just squared off will be his lower jaw. So there's the other side. And work from side to side, smaller beads at a time. I always like to work in little sections and then kind of build up to a larger hole later on. And I've seen some artists that will set down a large bead of acrylic and then rush to try to get everything that they want done, all the details in before the acrylic sets up on them. And if that's how you like to work, that's certainly, that works. If that's your style. For me, I like to just sort of piece it together and do little bits at a time. Just keep adding little sections. I added a little half circle coming off his bottom jaw that will be for his little tummy area, which that I will add more to later. Thicken up that lower jaw so it juts out a little farther from the nail. And then I'm going to be filling in his mouth with red. So just take a fairly small bead of red acrylic that's on the wet side and apply that inside the mouth. Let it just kind of flood the area. So you shouldn't have to push it around too much. It should just kind of be able to find its place inside the mouth. And then I'm going to be filling in his eyes with white acrylic. Same thing, you should be able to just let it kind of find its place if you use the tip of your brush to carve out those eye areas earlier. And then going back to your beige color acrylic, I'm going to be adding these little cheeks that are up above. And those actually, if you look at the pictures of Taz, they go down into the mouth area. So it goes up and over like that, and then take another little bit more of that acrylic and set that right down into his mouth and then blend that up for his cheeks. Just like so, use the tip of your brush to sort of carve out the different areas and the different indents here and there where it's needed. And then with some white acrylic, I'm going to start sculpting his teeth. So place each tooth down and then pull it into a nice little point. Then set down another one and keep working on them. Just like so. So those are the lower teeth, and then you're going to need to add his upper teeth. When you're adding the upper teeth, only do 2 of them. So to create more of a 3D depth to it, I decided not to do all of his teeth this way and to do a couple of them with paint so that they actually were a little flatter and sat farther back into his mouth. And then with a coral color, I'm going to be adding his tongue hanging out to one side. So that's why you didn't have to add all 4 teeth for his lower jaw either. So you can kind of get away with skipping out on a few of the teeth here and there. So add that tongue off to the side, give him a really goofy, crazy expression on his face. And a lot of that crazy expression will come when you start adding the painted details in a moment. But for now, you can already start to see that he's got that very classic Taz appearance. Add his little nose with black. And if you wanted to, one thing that you could do with black acrylic to make it 3D is give him his eyebrows. I decided just to do that with paint, but especially if you're working on a larger nail and this is a slightly bigger scale, you could certainly do that with this acrylic too, and that would be another thing that would add to it. And then with white acrylic, I'm going to start doing layers upon layers for the tornado that is around him that he's creating. So just set a bead of white acrylic down, and then with the tip of your brush sort of push it up into a pancake and then slide it up to the next one. So just keep creating these little white pancakes until you have it filled in all the way to the tip. And as you're going down, create them slightly smaller and smaller so they taper almost within the shape of the nail. And they don't have to be all lined up perfectly, so they're all, just like a perfect little triangle shape going down. They can be a little offset from side to side and go back and forth in a haphazard type manner. Just set down the next one and push it up against. Let them set a little bit before you start trying to push them up to the next one, because the more that they set up, the better it'll be a crisper line between each of the little rings of the tornado. So there's the next one, and then just keep going until it's all filled in. Then I'm going to take some diluted black paint and I'm going to start filling in all the way around him with little tiny outlines. And the reason I use diluted black paint for this is because if you use full strength black paint, your lines are probably going to end up being a little bit thicker. And they will end up being a little bit more crisp if you use full strength black paint, but that makes them harder to fix if you have a little accident of some variety. So using slightly diluted black paint, like as you can see with my finger, I just took and I tapped an area that I got paint where I didn't mean to, and it pretty much came off. So if you do have an issue, it's easier to remove it if it's slightly diluted. So just go around and add details wherever you think it's necessary, any outlines and so on and so forth. You don't necessarily have to outline every single last shape that you sculpted, but I would probably recommend outlining most of them. When you go to start outlining the top of his eyes, thicken up that line. That's the eyebrow line I mentioned that you could have done with acrylic if you wanted to. And so make that one a little bit more bold, a little thicker. Add 2 little dots, one in each of his eyes for the pupil. Then add a couple little outlines going back and forth across the tornado at the bottom. I then took some white paint and I'm going to be just kind of brightening up each tooth and then adding any of the teeth that I did not sculpt. So the 2 up above on his upper mandible, then adding some highlights on his nose and his eyes. And then I'm also going to take and add just a couple more outlines that I kind of missed or forgot. As you're looking at it, you may find something here or there that needs a bit more adjusting. But then go down back and forth across the tornado a little bit, adding outlines where you need to. I took a little bit of a gray color and added some shadows on the outside edges. And then with a bright white paint, just kind of brightening up the middle of each of those little rings that we made. I'm then going to apply a layer of gel sealer over the background and cure it. And then some matte top coat over Mr. Taz and cure it again. I absolutely love this design. I tell Melody all the time that she's a little Tasmanian devil, and she is. Sometimes she just is like a little tornado around the house. But I hope you guys like it as much as I do and take me in any recreations, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!